Okay, Brad, I cleaned my coffee grinder yesterday.
Uh-huh. Okay. Uh-oh.
I was like, after the coffee episode, somebody had talked about cleaning their grinder in the Discord, and I was like, oh, I should clean my grinder. I haven't done that in ever, and I've had the grinder for like 12 or 13 years now.
Okay.
So I opened it up and I went to the Barazza YouTube channel, and there was the people from their tech support channel they do YouTube videos about how to maintain their products, and they had a little thing there behind them that was like, fix it, don't toss it, like a little banner. And I was like, this is a company I really like. And they walked me through the whole process, and I took the burrs out and I cleaned them off. I got the air blaster that I used to clean out the PC and the vacuum cleaner and all that stuff, and blasted all the coffee dust off. And I got to the part of the video where they were like, hey, and there's a brush that we provide. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, wait, I know that brush. That's been in my drawer for the last 10 years. I didn't know what it went with. So I went and got the brush, anyway, the coffee maker's all clean. And I got to the end of this video, this kind of long video, and they were like, and by the way, if you need to do a deep clean on the grinder, don't use water on the burrs or whatever. You want them to stay nice and dry so they don't collect coffee unnecessarily. You buy these pods, these little pucks that you put in the coffee grinder, and they're like food safe, like a food safe dry cleaner that gets in there and cleans off the oils and stuff from the burrs. And they're called grinds with a Z.
Of course.
Because it's for millennials, I guess. I don't know.
Because they're extreme.
Yeah. And then I went to Amazon to purchase these, and I discovered an entirely new product category as a result. There's a company called Grinds with a 1 instead of an I, but with an S, that makes a mouth tobacco substitute that uses ground coffee in like dip pouches.
What?
And I'm going to tell you, I'm kind of interested.
You should try it. I am never good. That sounds awful, but you should try it.
They sell it in cans, just like your mouth tobacco. Okay, first off, if you're listening to this at home and you're curious about mouth tobacco, Brad and I both grew up in areas where mouth tobacco was prevalent. There was an entire subculture in my high school of people who found novel ways to dip while in class, frowned upon. It causes all sorts of dental problems and mouth problems.
Oh, it's awful.
I'm sure that this is also bad for you for a whole host of other reasons. I don't know.
Don't chew tobacco. It does not end well.
But this is coffee pouches. It's just coffee, no flavors or sweeteners. I mean, they also have ones that have flavors and sweeteners that just sits in your mouth. And the review comments are like, definitely helping me quit Copenhagen. Loves this flavor. Keeps me awake behind the wheel after a 12-hour night shift. This has made me a lot easier for me to stop using tobacco. After 40 years of smokeless tobacco, I was worried I couldn't this isn't a sponsored bit. I had no idea that this was a thing.
It seems like there's an upside to this. It also seems like it might be popular with truckers, or there's some potential there.
Well, so each pouch is equal to a half cup of coffee. Okay. And you're supposed to keep them in there for like an hour. They look kind of icky. I don't know, man. I'm not going to look. I'm not going to. This seems like forbidden fruit to me. But as a public service, if you like chewing tobacco and would like to not like chewing tobacco anymore, maybe try the coffee pouches. I don't know.
I think you look. I have often described this show as a science and technology podcast to people who ask, and I think it's time for you to do this for science.
I got to do some science. Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad. I am latent Brad. I'm on the other coast. We are fighting a losing battle against latency here.
Slow Brad can't defeat the speed of light.
No.
This week, we have a returning guest, our dear friend Wesley Fenlon, who is a senior writer at PC Gamer and PCGamer.com. They still make print over there. They still make magazines.
Do they? Wow.
Yeah. And earlier this year started a new newsletter that focuses on like what's going on in the emulations, like not just all the emulation scenes for games, called Read Only Memo, is on the show this week to talk about flip phones. Welcome to the show, Wes. Wes, welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you here. And I want to hear about your Bendy phone. But first, I want to talk. Can we talk about your newsletter a little bit before we go there?
Oh, my God. Well, what an opportunity. I would love to. First of all, thank you for having me back. I'm aiming to be like the SNL Alec Baldwin guest appearer on the podcast. This is my three-peat, I think.
Well, right now it's you and Kishore, I think, are tied for the first place spot, but Kishore is always the bearer of bad news, and you're always bringing something cool that we haven't looked at yet. So
I'll just keep spending money on cool tech stuff.
We had some fun science news last time, at least.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, last time it wasn't, the world might be ending this year. Last time it was, the world is definitely going to end in like 100 billion years.
See, we got time.
But anyway, Wes, everybody knows you from your work at PC Gamer, but you kicked off a newsletter last year now?
Yeah, it's been, it was like earlier this year. I've been writing about emulation at PC Gamer for years, largely focused on like the Dolphin emulator, which I'm a huge fan of, which does the GameCube and Wii. But yeah, I wrote about it a lot for PC Gamer, but it's such a niche interest that like isn't always kind of mainstream news, breaking news kind of stuff that I was like, I just want to do this more and kind of have my own thing going on the side. So I spun up a newsletter called Read Only Memo, which I've been doing since like March of this year. And I'm just kind of like rounding up, here's the cool stuff that's happened in the last 2 weeks in emulation. And it's given me a really good excuse to meet a ton of people in that community, like going out to the developers, and it's easy to track people down on Discord or via GitHub or something. And usually they're really excited to talk about whatever they're working on. And so it's fun to ask people about just some random patch that they did that fixed, a funny graphical bug in a game. Or I briefly talked with the person who's like started up a PS4 emulator recently, which has like grown really, really quickly. So I don't know, there's tons of interesting stuff going on. It's hard to keep tabs on all of it.
Well, yeah, I have a Mister that's sitting here on my desk that I haven't updated in about 6 months. And I'm thinking I'm going to declare Mr. bankruptcy to and start fresh from it. It's been a great resource. I enjoy it. And like the stuff that you've been writing about this for like 10 years at this point. Cause I think the first thing one of the first things you did at Tested was a BeastNess article.
Yeah, I'm glad you remember that. I interviewed Near, rest in peace, former emulator developers, incredible, and they were really dedicated to like the preservation side of emulation. And the reason they made BSNES was they looked at other Super Nintendo emulators, which worked perfectly fine, could play games, but they weren't accurate to the hardware down to that crazy degree that only a few emulator developers really, really, really care about. And, Near spent like 10 years or something making that emulator be able to play every single Mahjong game on the Super NES that had like a weird custom chip in it, and just making everything as perfect as it could be.
Yeah, that was such a loss. They were such a prolific figure in that scene. I wish I could remember what the specific example is here, but I was looking at something on archive.org recently that had nothing to do with any of the projects that I knew they had worked on. It was like some disk image. It was something preservation related. I should go try to find it. And the point is, I go look at the description on the archive page. Near had developed it. Wow. Something not related to BeastNess or any of the other high profile stuff they had done. It's just they were just all over the place.
Yeah, Near even chipped in on the Mother 3 like fan translation a little bit, had some involvement with the development of that. Yeah, like their name really popped up all over the place. But there's lots of other really smart, crazy talented people in the emulation scene who I enjoy talking to and trying to like raise their profiles a little bit. And they tell me a whole bunch of technical stuff and I understand like 10% of it, but I do my best to translate it into normal English.
There you go. But today, we're not going to talk about games. We're going to talk about, well, I mean, when you come, you often bring some sort of novel technology, something new and exciting. We're going to talk about bendy phones.
Bendy phones, flippy phones. Yeah.
Flippy phones. So for people who don't know, which I assume are mostly iPhone people, because the Android people seem to be fairly in the know, there's a bunch of phones on the market around the world. In the US, it seems like it's mostly Samsung and Motorola that are doing phones that bend. But yeah, and we have a couple, like Adam over at PC World is a noted bendy phone aficionado. He's gone with the wide boy rather than the tall boy. But yeah, they come in two shapes basically, is from what I can tell. One is the normal looking phone that opens up and it becomes a big square.
It's kind of a tablet.
It's two phones, facing each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but those have a screen on the outside. So you, like when you take it out of your pocket, you have a normal phone, but then if you open it up, you have a double wide phone basically. But the one that I think is interesting to me is the one that you are now on your second rev of, I think, Wes, right?
Yes. Yeah. I just this week got the Galaxy Z Flip 5, which is the sequel to the Z Flip 4, which I got back in like November. I think I bought it around Black Friday. So I spent, a good chunk of the last year using it as my only phone basically. And then I just upgraded to this one because Samsung offers crazy good trade-in values on their old flip phones. I think they just really want people to keep investing in this, I guess, this ecosystem or whatever you want to call it, to keep people hooked.
So did you buy the first one? Is it like you bought it on, you said you bought it on Black Friday. You bought it to dip your toes in?
Yeah, I'd been thinking about it since they put out the first flip. And I don't remember what that first generation cost, but I think it was at least $1,200. If it was not really expensive. 14. Yeah. And I was like, okay, looks cool. I'm into this idea. First gen is never the right time to buy in, right? So I waited, and then the second gen came out, which was the Z Flip 3. They just skipped a number for some reason, I think to keep it parity with the Folds marketing. That one was like, I can't remember if they lowered the price for that one, but they were getting the kind of performance up a little bit. The first generation did not have a screen on the outside at all. It had none of that kind of bonus functionality. And I think the battery life was really bad. So anyway, they finally added a little small screen. And then with the Flip 4, which was the one that I jumped in on, they added kind of a little bigger than a postage stamp, kind of a small, like 1.5 inch, 1.9 inch little screen that was like enough where you could read a text message, you could change your Spotify, music, you could get, a little notification or two on there. You could even read an email by scrolling through it. Took a while, but it kind of added enough of that functionality, and they lowered the price down to $1,000 that I was like, okay, this is the one to jump in on, especially when I can get a nice Black Friday deal on it.
Yeah. And it's so like that outside screen is interesting because it means you don't have to open it every time you want to use it.
Yeah. And I was really attracted to that idea of kind of still being able to use my phone, but not like fully using my phone, if that makes sense.
Well, there's something conceptually interesting to me about having to do something mechanical to engage with the phone versus just like seeing 100%. It sitting on the table and being like, oh man, that's my favorite thing in the world. I'm going to pick that up and look at it for a while. And then next thing I know, I've played Slay the Spire for 2 hours.
Yeah.
It's interesting because like these came out a few years ago. The first ones. I think the Fold was the first.
Yeah, it started with the Fold, and the first version of it they sent to reviewers infamously was like breaking in half when they were folding it.
Well, yeah, and they had all sorts. Like I remember there was a whole wave of bad press around it because like they also had the thing. There's a piece of very thin glass that looks almost like a screen protector, like the kind of plastic thing that you peel off of your phone when you get it and it's new. And a bunch of reviewers immediately ripped that off, and it was absolutely not supposed to be removed. And
let me stop before we get too much deeper in, because I have a question of nomenclature or maybe a philosophy of these phones. Would you say that are these phones, because we've used the terms bendy phone, flip phone here kind of interchangeably, but are these phones like a throwback to actual flip phone nostalgia from 15 plus years ago? Or are they like an outgrowth of smartphones that can now, be folded up and protected in your pocket. Like
I think at least
what is
the flip for me is definitely banking on a nostalgia factor.
Okay.
I mean, part of the reason these things exist is because Motorola has like made a push for them, right? They brought back the Razr branding, and the first Motorola flip even had the chin from the old Razr. Do you remember the Razr chin?
Yeah.
So
well, that's where the battery went. That's how it had. So that's why that thing lasted 7 days. Wes.
God, I miss that era. But yeah, they've unfortunately kind of moved away from that aesthetic with their flip phones, and now they're kind of already getting to that point where they all look the same. But I think the folds were a bit more in that sort of just what is the next tech evolution we can do to entice people into buying these phones, because obviously there's some appeal in having a phone that's now your tablet, so you don't need to buy a phone and a tablet, right? I think they were definitely going for the high end like techies who liked that. But the flips, I feel like, have been a bit more of an aesthetic push for at least for Samsung.
Could you just like real quick characterize what the full size screen looks like when it's fully open? Because like I'm so far behind on phone tech that I just assumed flippy phones like this still had like visible hinges in the middle of the screen, and that you had like two little screens on the inside. So when I saw an animation of this thing, I was like, oh, you open the thing up and it's kind of just looks like a tall smartphone. Like is once it's fully open, can you tell?
It does look
all?
like a tall phone. This is one of the interesting distinctions in this space is the hinge, right? Like there's a bunch of different people making these flippy phones. Most of them are not available in the US though. But there's a bunch of Chinese phone makers that are experimenting with different hinge types, different ways the glass folds. And Samsung has been getting some crap over the last year for how much of a crease their screen still had in them compared to these other companies that have been really rapidly iterating on that. But when you open it up, it's basically like a 21:9-ish vertical aspect ratio. So they're pretty tall and skinny. And then in the center, you just have a small dip where you can feel where the crease is in the phone, where it bends. The Z Flip 5, most people were talking about it as though it was exactly the same as the Flip 4 on initial impressions. But for me, it's been a noticeably lighter dip, shallower dip than the previous gen.
Does it get more pronounced over time?
I think it does. But I feel pretty confident in saying that it's shallower than my Flip 4 was when I got it. We'll see after 6 months or a year.
Do you like this? I'm asking a thing for my own personal neuroses, but do you feel like when you pick up your phone, do you think, oh man, I shouldn't open this? I don't. It's not actually that important to open my phone right now. I have a limited number of folds on this thing, or is it just like you don't worry about it after a couple of days?
I will say that I have that thought. I don't think it ever stops me from opening it, but there is that like tiny paranoia voice in the back of my mind that's like, well, I have, 200, 300,000 flips I'm able to do in my life. Like, should I be, there was one that I opened it and then closed it again 2 seconds later. Like that was a waste. Why did I do that?
It's not like the AirPod case where it's like so satisfying to open and click and open and click and open and click. Sorry, listeners.
It's more like your heart. You only have so many heartbeats in a lifetime, and you gotta. The answer to this question may just be lol who talks on the phone anymore, but do you have to open it all the way up to make an actual phone call, or are there like voice comms you can do with it in the closed state?
I think you can do it when it's open. I mean, or when it's closed. Sorry. Certainly if you're on like a Bluetooth, headphones or something like that. I actually can't remember off the top of my head the last time I took a phone call and whether I was able to do it with it when it was closed or not. But this one, they've added more functionality to the outer screen now. So I think I'm like 99% sure you are able to do that.
I was going to say the big jump from 4 to 5 seems to be that the outer screen went from being like a little tiny screen next to the camera to like the full top of the phone in the back now.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And what kind of what can you just run full ass Android apps on that now, or does it require some sort of special interface?
Yeah, it's sort of a complicated answer. By default, the outer screen has a selection of widgets you can use for it. The stuff you would kind of expect, right? Your calendar, music, alarms, all of that.
Weather, AQI.
Weather, yeah. Now Razr just lets you run any app on that external screen on their newest one. And that was like a big plus for them. People were really happy with that. And the screen was big enough on that thing that you really could use a lot of apps pretty effectively on the outer screen. Samsung by default doesn't let you do that. They have added a app launcher feature of like approved apps that of everything I had installed on my phone, I could literally use like Google Maps and text messages. And those were the only things under that approved list. Not a great list, but Samsung has an app called Good Lock that's kind of their like Android experimentation app with a bunch of like launcher features and a bunch of other stuff, theming. And that includes a function that lets you just put any app onto the cover screen launcher. So they're kind of making you be a bit more of a tinkerer to be able to enable this. I guess they don't want people to like accidentally have a bad experience, but they're like, if you want to have a bad experience or potentially a good experience, just add whatever app you want through this app and then go to town. So I've been playing around with that.
So do they scale? Like, is it like you get like a normal phone aspect ratio app on that square screen, or is it like stretched to fit? Or
most
is it
apps are like stretched to fit into kind of this square format. And then on this phone, you know, it's basically like a 4:3 outer display, or maybe it's a square outer display with a little extra kind of little notch at the bottom.
It has like a half notch,
dip,
right?
Yeah, that kind of goes around the camera. And that dip is actually really nice. It's where the, you know, swipe up to hide, swipe up to go back to your like home screen kind of menu lives. So you swipe up from that little corner if you want to, you know, change apps or whatever. But yeah, most apps kind of just form to the square screen, and some apps just work on that. And then the layout like really cannot handle a small square screen and they just look really bad.
Can you scroll through notifications and stuff like that on that small screen?
Yeah, totally. You go over to the left from the home screen and you just have all your notifications there. And of course they let you customize your clock and all that stuff.
If you tap, like if you activate a notification on the small screen, does it like buffer that activation? So you then open the phone and it goes to the thing you just tapped? Is it smart enough to remember that? That's cool.
Yep. Yeah. If you open, and some things you'll click on and it'll be like, okay, open your phone now. And it'll take you to that thing. Yeah.
Is there like a little homebrew scene for that screen? I mean, I guess every model has a different screen, so it would be hard to standardize against, but I mean, are people porting Doom to it? I guess running Doom on it is the cliche example, but I mean, are there like goofy, weird homebrew uses for it?
So when I got the Galaxy Flip 4, I messed around a little bit with an app called, I believe, Cover OS, which is developed by one person. And it is absolutely what you're talking about. It's the like superpower launcher for this cover screen. Even with that tiny screen on the previous phone, this app was letting you run full applications on it if you wanted, customize it like crazy, do a ton of stuff that Samsung wouldn't let you do. But it had a pretty expensive model. Like the free version, you couldn't really do much of anything on it. And then the paid version had a bunch of tiers like, do you want to pay for it for a year? Do you want to pay for it for life? Do you want to pay for it for life, but only for this phone? Do you want to pay for it for life for all the phones in the future that you buy? And I kind of had in my head that I was probably going to upgrade to the next year's Flip, which I've now done. And I figured that one's probably going to go to like a full size outer screen. So I decided to not spend the $15 or whatever it would have cost me to buy that app and like go crazy with the customization. And this one, I think you're not going to need as much homebrew scene development to be able to do stuff on this outer screen. I think Samsung will keep doing updates for it. And I'm hoping that more apps start moving towards having better compatibility with these kind of small screens. And so it'll become less and less of a need over time, I think, for those homebrew fixes.
Yeah, I assume, I mean, since Google launched the Fold and they're doing the tablet size, you know, the tall that gets square and announced that earlier this year, I assume that there's support for the essentially 3-screen interface on that thing built into Android going forward. But I wondered, like, I assume there's no Android level support for the front small screen on your phone, unless maybe it just works itself out, because I guess it is still 3 screens.
Yeah, I think it's the kind of interplay between them, I think, is at this point still just driven by Samsung programming some of its own stuff into One UI. But the launcher that lets you just put any app on the cover screen has been an interesting experiment for me to see what stuff can just run at, a square resolution pretty well. And it's like, I would say it's like a decently high percentage of apps. And then, like Google Maps works quite well on this little screen. But then there's other ones I ran into, like the Cash app, where it expected you to have, kind of more of the traditional vertical candy bar format for its number pad and then its little bit at the top. And so the number pad was squished into like the most tiny little, sandwich horizontal number pad that's like completely unusable. So it's not perfect for sure.
What's the ambient info on that screen like when your phone's in like the idle sleep state?
It has an always on display if you want to use that, so you can get your clock and stuff. You can really customize what you put on that screen. So the way I have it right now is kind of more focused on the imagery. They let you put animated GIFs on there, which I really like. So I've got That's like a bunch of like character sprites and like fighting game backgrounds that just kind of lightly animate on there. But you can get your battery percentage. You can get your clock, your camera widget if you want to click, to launch straight into the camera. You can swipe over to the side to see your notifications. Let me look at what else they let you put on the customization. Can you take
pictures while it's? I assume you can take pictures while it's closed, right?
You can. I don't know if you can take a picture when it's fully closed. I guess you can. You could just kind of hold it up, and you can just like take a selfie with it closed. But the kind of more ideal use for that is when you like flip it up, and like prop it, put it kind of in its L shape format and prop it up on a table or something, so that you can then use the outer display as like a selfie preview, basically.
I noticed that L shape on the product page on Samsung's site. They had at least a couple of shots of it in that configuration. Is there any kind of facility at all for it locking into that kind of shape, or do you you just kind of said you have to prop it?
It'll really, I mean, it doesn't lock, but it's quite stiff, quite firm when you put it in a position. So it'll pretty much stay at any orientation or any angle that you put it at. It'll pretty much sit there. So you don't really have to do. It's not too fiddly. Like, it's pretty easy to just kind of put it where you want. And
it's like an infinity hinge, right? Where it locks it, where you can set it at any point along the distance. This is what it looked like.
So some of the other cover screen options, depending on what you want on there, you can just have it like show you a gallery of your recent photos. You can just stick that on there. You can have the calendar show you what day it is. You can have a little weather widget if you want to see what the temperature is outside. I think that's kind of it for the default. That's
the kind of like,
it's about what you would expect.
Yeah. Like I want weather and AQI and my next appointment and maybe a way to open the camera app or the flashlight.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I ask last question on that L shape? Yeah. Are there any Nintendo DS emulators that are aware of the split there that can put the screens in the right place?
I haven't messed around with DS stuff, but it's on my list to do. But I have played Wave Race Blue Storm on the exterior screen, which did not go well because I was using the touch screen to try to drive. Super Monkey Ball, surprisingly playable on the little screen. But I ran into a weird, I don't know if it's a bug or what with Samsung's One UI or with Android or what, where I synced a Xbox controller to it Bluetooth. Controller works fine when the phone's open. When you close the phone, analog sticks still read and the analog triggers still read, but the digital face buttons, A, B, X, Y, start, etc., will not send their commands through to the phone. And I Googled this, and like, it is a thing people have brought up, but most people say, oh, go disable something in accessibility settings and then it'll work. That there was nothing in accessibility settings for me to disable that was causing a problem. So I couldn't figure it out.
Weird. Yeah. It's like they turn off. I mean, I assume that when you close it, they turn off a subsystem of hardware.
That feels like it must be.
Yeah. What's that with the extra screen on the back? I wonder what's the battery life like, Wes?
It's It's okay. It's pretty good.
Okay.
I think if you're opening the screen and using it, full size screen, like it's a bright OLED, it puts off a lot of light. It's a 120 hertz screen, but it can do the 1 hertz thing if you're not scrolling.
Yeah.
It's fine. It gets me through the day. I'm not like a super heavy user. I don't watch a ton of video on my phone. I've never had the phone die on me. With the Flip 4, like I never hit 0 before I got to a charger, and like it can fast charge quite quickly up to, whatever, 70% or something. So it hasn't been an issue for me, but if you're like a really heavy user and you're the kind of person who goes for like, I'm going to buy the XL phone every year because I want that extra battery life, this is definitely going to be a struggle phone for you, probably.
Yeah,
probably.
Like it's my pattern was often that like I'd be fine when I'm sitting at my desk because I'm sitting at my desk in front of an enormous computer and I don't use the phone that much. Mm-hmm. And then when I go to like E3 or CES or something and I'm using my phone for 10 hours, 14 hours a day, I'd have to start carrying batteries. And like the nice thing about the big modern giant super slab phones is that they're all battery and like, I get 2 days on my iPhone usually these days.
Yeah, I think one advantage of this model having the bigger screen on the exterior now is that is going to draw more power than the little screen did, but it gives you so much more you can do on the little screen without opening the phone, which is obviously going to draw way more power than using the outer screen. That I think once you build that use habit, the battery life on this thing could potentially be fantastic if you're using it on the outside 2/3 of the time.
That makes sense. What about, okay, so you had the 4 for about 8-9 months.
Yeah.
How did it age during that time? Was there any weird stuff that happened?
It aged well up until the last month or so, where so that it's the way the screen works is it's this really thin, flexible glass, right? And then they put a screen protector on top of that you are not supposed to remove. That screen protector is there to keep the screen from breaking or getting getting particles in there and whatnot, right? About a month ago, the corner of the screen protector in the crease in the middle, one side started to kind of peel up on me a little bit and like get an air bubble under there, which was quite visually obnoxious. Like it didn't damage the phone, but looking at it, I was like pissed off every time that I saw it. And I would kind of push my finger over it and it would, press back down and then kind of pop back up. But Samsung does give you a free screen protector replacement within the first year. So if I was keeping that phone, I would have probably gone to wherever they do service stuff and gotten that replaced before I hit the year mark. But otherwise, it was fine. Like I didn't have any, battery life didn't take a massive nosedive. The screen held up pretty well, other than that little cover issue. So yeah, I didn't really have any complaints.
And I was gonna say, was that screen protector replacement? Is the screen protector plastic?
I think it's plastic.
Glass?
Yeah,
okay.
It might be glass. I think it's a plastic screen protector though.
And I assume that they have like someplace local you could just go and have that done and not have to like send it away or something.
I think so. I didn't look it up, but I mean, Samsung has such a big presence here that I feel like in the US, I feel like they must have service centers or authorized people. So but yeah, I kind of was just living with it for a while.
So sorry if you've mentioned this. What kind of display is it? Is it OLED or LCD?
It's an OLED. Yep.
Okay.
It's kind of a classic Samsung OLED, gets mega bright, gets pretty dim at night. Actually too dim. It's like really hard to see even in the dark if you turn on the extra dim option. It's roughly 21:9. I think it's slightly more vertical than that, but it's nice for watching a 70 millimeter movie or something that was shot in that ultra wide aspect ratio.
So you mentioned that the glass cover is a single pane of glass that folds, but is the screen also a single OLED screen that folds, or is it actually technically two?
It's one screen.
Flush screen. Yeah, wow, really?
It's one really thin piece of glass screen that folds. Yeah.
Like the OLED as well. I didn't realize OLEDs themselves were foldable at this point.
Yeah, that was the big innovation with these phones, and also the reason why that initial fold model was breaking on people, because they hadn't quite nailed the flexible glass yet. They thought they had nailed it, but they needed another generation or two to get to the point where they weren't cracking in the middle. And I think there's maybe still some issues with that over time. Like if I flip this phone a couple 100,000 times, the glass will probably eventually break in the center. But hopefully that doesn't happen before I'm ready to upgrade to a new phone.
See, according to my iPhone, I pick up the phone about 40 times a day. Let's see, that means
I think it's rated for 200,000 volts.
Yeah.
Or
so
flips.
I have a good number of years on the phone. The phone battery will die well before I crack the screen if the rating holds.
Hang on, where do you get your pickup stats? I need to look at this
screen
now.
time. It's one of the things it yells at you about every week.
So I have a question for you two, being longtime iPhone users. Well, I know you've dabbled in Android, right?
I've like when I was working at Tested, I would switch back and forth pretty much every other year.
But I don't know. Do you find the novelty of this enticing at all? Do you think you would get a flip phone if Apple made one? Or do you feel like, I don't know. Where are you guys at on iPhone versus Android and flip appeal right now?
So one of the things when you're in a long-term relationship and have a kid is you get pretty locked into whichever phone your partner has.
Yeah.
Like when the iPhone 10 came out was the last time I bought the 10s. So that would have been like 2016 or 2017. I bought a Pixel that year and I lasted maybe 2 months, and Gina was like, "Hey man, you're not getting group text messages." I think a lot of these problems are solved now, just to be clear. But the group text message problem was enough that I was like missing shit, and she was like, "You got to go back and get an iPhone again so I can communicate with you." Like the Fold is interesting to me. I don't like the other thing I was going to ask you about is the camera situation, because you have a two camera on the Flip, and I was curious, is it a tele and a like a normal lens, or is it a wide
and an ultra wide? So no telephoto.
Oh, got it. See, so the telephoto is so spectacularly useful, and since it's the main way I take pictures now, I don't know that I can go back to not having the telephoto.
Yeah. So the Galaxy Fold, the big tablet style one, does have the telephoto. It also costs $1,800.
That's a lot.
The Flip does not have the telephoto. I wonder if next year will be the year that they move to that. But I think they've been really driven. They've been trying to drive the price down. Like, I think that's been the big thing for these phones, is they knew the first few models, not many people were going to buy them. They were too expensive. The Flip is definitely the one they're trying to get mass market appeal with, because it's significantly cheaper than the bigger screens on the Fold. So I wonder if they're going to hit a point where they do a cheap Flip that gets down to, $700 or something, $800, and then like a premium Flip that is 11 or 12, but gets you the telephoto, or maybe stays at $1,000. I would love a telephoto lens on it, but otherwise the cameras it's Samsung. Like, they're solid. They're good cameras. They take a good photo. They're maybe a little bit oversaturated, but like on the whole, they look really nice. They're just not quite the best you can get from a smartphone.
From a phone camera. Yeah. I like this to me fits the same space as like the SE, the iPhone SE and the minis, right? Like it would be really nice to have a pair, like, okay, I'm past skinny jeans age, so it's less of a problem now. But like, it would be nice to have a smaller phone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I'm willing to sacrifice battery life. I do use the long battery a lot.
Actually, that was something I meant to ask. Well, so in the closed configuration, yes, it's less footprint, but is it thicker, or how? Well, obviously it's thicker, but how much? So, like, is it so thick that you're kind of losing what you gain in footprint? You're losing in.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel a little silly to be like, oh, the phone's so much smaller, but then you're like, well, but it's twice as thick. It's not actually smaller, right? But I mean, it's pretty thin. I mean, I've got like an iPhone 8 on my desk right now, which is obviously, I mean, I don't know, it's about half the thickness of the folded in half Flip or so.
It looks like folded. It looks like the size of a GBA Lite, the bottom part, not the screen bit.
Yeah, very much in the GBA SP.
Yeah, those are
SP. Yeah,
it is thinner than an SP. I'm pretty sure.
I mean, it's definitely thinner than SP. I'm saying just the bottom part where the controls and the battery and stuff were.
Yeah.
like it's interesting because like one of the marketing photos that Samsung has shows a woman putting into like a jeans jacket pocket on the top, which is like, this is shirt pocket territory. A lot of people, when razors were a thing, would carry their phone in their shirt pocket if they were like business guys with shirt pockets. I don't have shirt pockets ever.
I think they are wisely trying to market this phone to women, and they should be, because it's a phone that can actually fit in a woman's pocket. Like, women's clothing is infamously like terrible in regards to pockets. If you've never listened to the podcast series Articles of Interest by Avery Trufelman, she has a fantastic episode about why women's clothing evolved to have no pocket space. It's ridiculous. But this phone can fit in a pocket. It can fit in a small purse. It can fit in, just places that an other phone wouldn't. And that extra thickness is usually not going to be a deal breaker the way an extra, 4 inches of vertical, screen space would. So I think that's smart of them. And I don't know, I get a lot of interest in this thing when I'm just out using it. Like, people want to see it. People think it looks really nice. They did a good job with like the color choices with it. So it's definitely got kind of an aesthetic like hook to it that a lot of people, even people who use iPhones, are like, oh, I probably wouldn't switch, but like, I really want it. They want it to be an iPhone that does this.
Would you put this in your back pocket, Wes?
I'd be scared to sit on it, but it would fit easily. But I've got big jeans back pockets. But yeah, I don't know. I like it in the front pocket. I would maybe put it in a shirt pocket, like a button down shirt pocket. I would give that a try. And then I would probably bend over and it would fall out and shatter, and I'd be really sad. But
yeah, the phone sales guys loved people who put in their shirt pockets because they used to sell a lot of phones to those people. Is the bottom back glass too, or is it plastic?
It is. Yeah, it's some version of fancy Gorilla Glass, Virtuous 7. I don't know what they call it.
Borosilicate spiked glass.
Yeah. I did want to mention one thing about the flippiness. So I'm not going to say deal breaker with the phone, because I do like the phone, but the one thing that really drew me to these phones was the idea of that physical interaction with the phone. Something we don't get from smartphones anymore. They're so like, they barely have buttons anymore, right? Like the iPhone got rid of the bottom button, the home button. I liked the idea of bringing back that feeling of opening your phone. Like, it was just really fun to flip open an old flip phone and feel that mechanical weight to it. These phones completely fail at that experience because they want the hinge to be stiff enough that it's not going to flop around on you and it can sit in any position like we described, right? Opening this phone with one hand is nerve-wracking. You feel like you're going to drop it. You feel like it's going to slip out of your hand. It's way too stiff to be able to just, I feel like if I was going to try to flip it open, that I would throw it through the window and, out into the street. Closing it with kind of a hand snap is doable. And closing it with your other hand and smacking it closed has a nice physical, clap to it. But I really wish that they were able to find a way to give the hinge that stiffness to let it sit in position, but still be able to snap it open with one hand.
Yeah, you want that Star Trek communicator. You want to hear the chirp when they open it. You want to flip it open, and yeah.
And I'm actually surprised that no one making it. It makes me feel crazy that no one else wants this, because that's like so clearly the attraction for me to this design. I'm surprised no one has made a case for it that has like a little thumb kind of ledge on it that would let you use your thumb to just like pull it, pull the whole thing open. But from what I've seen, nobody has made a case with a little extra lip on it like that, which seems to me like an obvious addition for this thing. So I don't know, maybe nobody cares about being able to snap this thing open with one hand, but I do.
What is the case situation like? I mean, like in terms of form factor and also materials.
Most of the ones that I saw for the Flip 4 they don't cover the hinge. So it's kind of like a front and back cover. And now obviously they're going to have a bigger kind of carve out for this big cover screen on the front. But you can get your plastic cases, you can get your leather or pleather cases. I think they kind of all look about the same, the way like most phone cases do, but so far I've been going the caseless route. I don't know. Are you guys caseless, or are you always put a case on there to protect it?
I only grudgingly started using cases when the iPhones went to glass backs. I was very much a raw or nothing prior to that. Like, I actually started to ask earlier if the folding nature of this thing kind of obviates the need for a case. I mean, obviously the external screen is still exposed, and I would hope that's durable and scratch resistant to some degree, but like, maybe you just feel like you need a case less with this form factor. I don't know.
That was a big part of the appeal to me, was the idea of protecting the interior screen, even if you dropped this thing. Having said that, it seems like a lot of the drops break the hinge. And so that, if your hinge breaks and you can't open the phone properly or use it opened properly, then I guess that kind of like destroys the advantage of it being a closing phone. So luckily I haven't dropped my Flip 4 onto any surface that damaged it. I did drop it a couple times and it held up fine. But it seems like one of those things where almost like if you're driving a really small and light car and you get into a minor car wreck, like it's totaled because it's a small and light car. Whereas, an old Volvo would just like shake it off and
you just rebend the frame and put a quarter panel on. Yeah.
So yeah, I think unfortunately, because it's just such a complex design, even though that interior screen is supposedly protected, a drop could still be pretty bad for it. But I don't know. I went caseless with the Flip 4. I think I'm going to go caseless with this one. I've never been a phone case user. For many years, I had a great run of not damaging my phones. And then I chewed through like 4 pixels in about 3 years, dropping them and breaking screens and stuff. But they were so freaking cheap to upgrade between them. And I use Google Fi and they like always have good offers and stuff. So it was kind of just fine. I could make do and then upgrade the next year and get a new phone and then drop it again.
It looks like you can get like OtterBox style protective cases even, but I don't see anything that's waterproof for fairly obvious reasons, because it's got moving pieces and you're not going to be able to seal it up appropriately.
Yeah, it has like a IPX8 rating, so it is rated for water. Not you don't want to dunk this thing, but like it can get water on it and it's fine. But
you dust can drop it in the toilet and it'll survive.
Survive. Yeah. But dust is still the danger. The X means no dust protection, right? So they haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah. I'm like, it's really wild. Before we did the show, I looked at some of the Chinese companies that are making these, and it seems like it's a growing chunk of the market there.
Yeah.
Like there's a bunch of innovation. Like you said, the hinge designs are, I mean, it's literally like looking at Galapagos birds in that there's 50 different hinge designs and nobody's settled on the right thing. And it's interesting because the phone, like it's a place that the phone market hasn't been since the iPhone 10 and the slab phones started. The notch slab phone started taking off 7 years ago. So I am really interested to see this. I can't imagine Apple getting into this space unless they have a hinge design that they really like and that is a no that's a no excuses hinge, right? Like. Like your bubble sitch on the 4 is something that they would, I don't think they would ship, but I don't know.
I think you're right. Yeah.
There's 2 questions there. I mean, I came into this wanting to ask you guys, do you think Apple will follow this route? And like you actually partially answered the other question, Wes, when you mentioned earlier that people are kind of intrigued by this thing, because there's with Apple, it seems like there's can we get the materials and the engineering and the design into an Apple-like place that we're satisfied with? But there's also, is there like a market opportunity for the types of people who like to buy Apple products? And so like that was my other question, is like, do you think Apple sees this as something that fits into the Apple style of product in a way that their customers are going to want? You saying people are taken with this thing, like there's at least obviously some novelty to it.
Yeah, people definitely are into the novelty. I guess the question is that novelty like going to sell on the billions scale that Apple wants to sell at, right? Or are people would they buy one and then go, no, it's like too many compromises, like I don't want this anymore, and then just go back to their normal style phone? I think that's probably a lot of people. Like a lot of people would would buy it once, at least at this stage where there's still stuff to be worked out about them, and just go like, too many compromises for me, but that was cool. But that was kind of why I jumped in on it. I was like, I know I can buy this first gen at a discount. I'll probably be able to upgrade to the next one. Samsung was offering like $900 trade-ins towards the $1,000 phone if you had a previous gen flip. So I was like, I bought my first one for $600. So I was like, okay, if I pay $600, I can upgrade, essentially get the new phone still cheaper than I would have, paid like face value for the first one. So like it was kind of a win-win for me, assuming I didn't destroy the Flip 4 before the Flip 5 came out, which I managed to avoid doing.
Well, so they're clearly investing in it because they think it's a future. Like they think there's a future there, right?
Seems like it, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, back on Apple, like, I don't know. I mean, they tend to enter markets after they've kind of been established and then do it to their level of polish that nobody else is doing. Right. So they've got to be experimenting with these things, but maybe they're still at the point where things like that bubble and the cover protector, like you mentioned, Will, would just be stuff that they just go, like we're not going to ship a phone that has any chance of this kind of thing happening. So it might still take them years to get to the point where they can make one that's sort of flawless to the Apple satisfaction. But I don't know, maybe by that point, this is kind of a fad that has blown over and they just ignore it. I'm not sure.
The full back screen is the first one that I've seen that I was like, oh, right. This is like probably 70% of the things I look at my phone for, I could do on that small screen. And then the big screen would be for typing. If I just need information, the back screen seems great. If I need to type something, it seems like you'd want to open it and use the full long screen.
How do you two feel about your phone being a fun thing versus a utility thing? Because for me, buying this was largely because I was like, my phones have been the same for years. This used to be a fun, novel gadget to me. It is not that anymore. It is just a utility for me. And I was like, I'm ready. I'm like ready to be just kind of entertained by this thing again and just feel a little bit excited about it and it to feel a little fresh. So that was why I bought into it. But I know that that's not what everybody wants from their phone.
For me, the phone is so important for work that I don't I don't want risk. Like it's like overclocking on my desktop, right? Like when I was just using my desktop computer at home to play games and I had another computer at an office someplace that I used for work and for the business of making money. Then I would overclock and I would do some stupid stuff put a big custom water cooling loop in. These days I don't have that. Like I'm pretty risk averse on the phone. So if I wouldn't, I guess I don't use a case anymore, but that's also because I know I can go to the Apple store and give them $100 and they'll give me a new screen and later that day. I think this would be a second gen purchase for me for sure. Like I don't even upgrade my phone every year anymore. Wes, like I'm not on the upgrade plan thing. I get one when they have something that looks nice, which usually is like the camera's 3% better or something. So probably no for me.
To give you an idea of my level of fascination with smartphones, I bought the new SE last year, which is now a 7 or 8 year old design.
Okay.
When did the iPhone 6 come out? I forget. Anyway, it looks just like it looks like the last two phones I've had. Like it's like whatever. I am completely 100% in the appliance utility end of the spectrum at this point.
The money is more. You care more about not spending a shitload of money on it than you do the baubles.
I just don't do enough with the phone to justify it, honestly. Like anything I can do on a bigger screen, I absolutely am going to do on a bigger screen. So it does what it needs to do as a phone, and that's fine.
That's why I haven't been interested in the folds. Like I'm all about the flip form factor. Is the fold? I'm like, I see the appeal of having a big tablet screen if you're a really heavy phone user, but I'm like, I don't really want to watch. The only time I watch movies or TV on my phone is if I'm on an airplane. Like I do not use it as I'm going to lay in bed and watch a movie on my phone. Like I use a TV, I use a monitor, I use some other thing for reading. If it's not a website or a newsletter, like I want to read on my Kindle or an actual book, like a bigger surface of some kind. So for me, I just didn't really get the appeal of the tablet thing for the way I use devices. I think I just have an older school, like I'm going to sit at my computer, I'm going to use my laptop. Like my phone is kind of the in-between device. So I didn't want that huge screen. But the Flip was just, I don't know, there's like enough silliness there that I was just really attracted to it.
I mean, honestly, if it was the one that I really looked at and was like, this is cool, was the original Razr with the chin. Like when the idea that you have a thinner screen on top, that's like was pretty compelling. The kind of DS or GBA SP style sandwich Flip is maybe less appeal. I don't know. Like I look, realistically, when one of these comes out, if it doesn't have a crap camera, I'll probably try it. That's going to be the gate for me more than anything, I bet.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing one of these get a telephoto, and then I'll send it to you and be like, all right, well, you got to follow
time. Yeah, and then you can talk to Gina and be like, hey, you're not going to be able to text him ever again. We're going to have to start using WhatsApp. It's going to be a disaster.
Let me pitch you guys
he's going to be Telegram again.
Yeah. Telegram's great. Everybody should get on Telegram.
No, no Telegram. But yeah, so yeah, I guess we should talk about the big ones for a sec. They're a lot more expensive generally. They kind of are like the neither fish nor fowl of phones and tablets. Like that part of it. Like I really like having a dedicated iPad. I bought one last year when the M2s came to the iPad Pros, and I wasn't expecting to find it as useful as I have, and I literally use it every day more than my phone at this point. So like I get the appeal, but I also think that these aren't going to be like what the size of the tablet that you get with this is too small to do the stuff that I do on the iPad, and not big enough and too big to carry in my pocket everywhere is kind of where I end up.
They're definitely on the heavier side as phones go. Samsung managed to slim down the newest, the Z Fold 5. It's 253 grams. I don't know how much that compares to a typical like iPhone XL. But the Pixel Fold is 283, so 30 grams heavier, which is a significant difference. Like it's a big boy.
Yeah, it's still heavier. It's still heavier than an iPhone. Yeah. I think I'm scrolling here. Of course, the it's in ounces. So 0.18 ounces is. Let's see who can type it in fastest. It's 5 grams. That seems low.
It can't be 5 grams.
That's. I think
your phone's made out of paper, Will.
Look, I think this may shock you, but I think that Google's hey, here's how we scraped the details from the page. AI maybe is shit. Hold on.
Wait, did something go wrong in a Google search and give you bad information?
I know, it's shocking. Let me go to Wikipedia. They're reliable. I didn't think this was going to come up, so I didn't bother to look for this.
I think the state they're at with these tablets right now is kind of like that transition from Android Honeycomb to Ice Cream Sandwich, where they made a tablet OS and then they were like, okay, how do we make this like just Android, right? I think they are kind of in that space where Google is now going, okay, we need to make more apps work across all these different form factors, whether you're using a vertical screen or a fat screen, and kind of seamlessly transition. So they're making that happen, but it's taking a while. I think in the Verge's review of the Pixel Fold, they were talking about how like Instagram couldn't use the full square frame of the folded out version of the Fold, which is kind of a bummer. But I feel like in another year or two, we're going to start seeing practically all the major apps move over and support this stuff pretty seamlessly.
Well, especially now that they're making one, right? Like that's always when Google starts making it, that's when Android gets serious about supporting it. The iPhone 14 Pro Max is 240 grams for the record.
So that's pretty close. Like they're getting in spitting distance.
Yeah, 40 grams is a half an ounce or something. So yeah, it's an interesting place. I'm excited that people are doing weird stuff with phones again, honestly.
Yeah, whether it's something I'm interested in or not, it's cool to just see something new to talk about in that space. But like iPhone sales have been flat for the last couple of years. Like feels like we've just reached some point of. I started to say tedium, like maybe that's a little harsh, but like phones are just phones now.
Yeah,
I mean, that market, it's funny when we started tested in 2010, it's one of the things we were talking about with the PC market, right? Like we'd reached a point where you know, the new CPU is 5% faster than the last gen CPU, and the market was really mature, and there was obvious runway left, and there still is, but it wasn't. You weren't getting, hey, now you have programmable shaders in your graphics pipeline every other year like you had been for the last 20 years. And the phone market hit that, I think, a lot faster, partly because it has to fit in your pocket, and partly because it has to, you can't use more power than you can charge on a battery in a day. And the battery tech is still more or less the same as it always has been, or has been for the last 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, I like that people are also just making weird choices right now with these phones, like the Vivo X Flip, which is one of the Chinese phones. They just went with a full pleather exterior for the parts of the phone that are not screen. And like, I don't know that I want that, but when's the last time somebody made a phone that wasn't just all glass, right? It's like, it's just cool that they're trying other things. It reminds me of the early in the smartphone era where people were making some pretty bizarre choices and kind of going out and just going on a limb, going for it with some unusual designs that usually didn't win out, but you had choices back then. And now it is kind of everybody's making the same phone with their own software on it, more or less, or a better camera, you know?
Yeah, there was a period of time in the early 2010s when like you could make people realized you could make a phone and sell 100,000 units and probably be okay financially, and like Motorola made a bunch of weird experiments, and Nokia made a bunch of weird experiments, and like that is those slabs with notches have replaced all of those. So
yeah.
Anyway, Wes, thank you so much for coming by. This has been fantastic. I want to hear more. I want to hear. Please let us know if there's any disasters in the future.
Will do. Thanks for helping me justify buying a new phone.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like Samsung really subsidized your cost on it. So thanks,
Thank you,
Samsung as well. Yeah. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, you can find me on PC Gamer, and you can find my emulation newsletter at readonlymemo.com.
It's a great name.
Wow, you got the .com too.
Yeah,
fancy.
I got readonlymemo.com. Oh, I wish we had 30 minutes to talk about like TLDs, because I was it took me so long to come up with this name. I had a list of much worse names, and I hit on this one, and I was like, that's a pretty good name for a newsletter, I think. Got the .com. I really wanted to get read-only.memo, but there isn't a .memo, which feels like it should be a TLD. I figured out that there is a .mo TLD, but it is a
it's like Mozambique or something, probably.
Yeah, it's
right?
like you have to be like, you have to work for the government of a particular country to be able to get one of those domains. So I was like, well, shit, who do I need to petition to get this permission?
Then you have to decide if you want to actually split a word across both parts, which I find a bit gauche personally.
No. Okay. Look, you just need what you need to do is get .emo to be a thing, and then you're good to go. Yeah, that's My Chemical Romance. It's going to happen.
Would you unsubscribe, Brad, if I had .emo? Would that be off-putting?
I don't know. I mean, if you did Mozambique, just try it out. Like read-only-med.mo. Like that, you have to think about how to verbalize it. You know?
Yeah. Who do I need to petition to get .memo to become a domain? Is it Google? Are they the ones who decide this stuff?
I probably.
But we've been talking about doing how TLDs work episode for a long time. You need like $150,000, and it's ICANN. Right.
Yeah. I do not have a spare $150,000 for my hobby project, unfortunately.
What if you did a Kickstarter where you sold tickets for the first domains?
Oh my God, that's such a good idea that we have to cut it out of the podcast.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind.
.memo. Please make it happen.
Are we going to backdoor our way into becoming a domain registrar? Because that seems fun.
You and I think different things are fun, Brad.
I'll sign up with you, Brad. I'm on Pork Bun right now because of you guys, but I'll move over to Brad's domains whatever.
.memo. Clearly.
.memo. Yeah. This is the future.
Wes, thank you so much for coming by. This has been fabulous to talk about the Bendy phone situation.
Yes, we're in our Bendy Phone era now.
How many eras have we been through now? We've been through the Bendy Phone era. We've been through the we're in the room temperature superconducting era. We're in the climate change is real and happening everywhere era. That's kind of more of a bummer one.
Yes, and the too much caffeine or no caffeine era.
Yeah, maybe it's acid, not caffeine era. There's the electric car charging era. That one goes on longer than you might want sometimes. Coffee era. I've been in a coffee era for a really long time, for an entire, maybe 2 eras by this point. But we wouldn't be here at all without our beautiful Patreon patrons.
That's right. Like we're in our permanent era, the thanking our patrons era.
Yeah, it's always a good time to thank your patrons. So thank you, patrons.
Thank you.
As always, we like to thank all of our patrons. If you want to find out how you can support the show or check to make sure that Patreon didn't screw up billing and maybe kick you off of the Discord and the whole thing, if you've been having trouble getting in, there was some billing shenanigans at the 1st of August this year. You can go to patreon.com/techpod. You can check your status. You can see what tier you are. You can sign up to support the show because we are 100% listener supported. There's no ads. Your ad skip isn't working well here. We just don't do them.
That's right.
We love you all so much that we aren't going to make you listen to Blue Chew ads. You're welcome.
Yes, we love
America.
you so much. We're just pouring advertising money down the drain.
Yeah. Interesting. So yeah, you can go to patreon.com/techpod, and for $5 a month, you get access to the Patreon episode every month. You get access to the fabulous TechPod Discord, which is full of beautiful nerds just like you who are talking about the things that we talk about in the show. Like the coffee talk is still going. Just like it keeps coming back. People are discovering the episode and they come back and they're like, "Hey, I want to talk about maybe we need to do a coffee podcast." That's the thing I'm taking away from this whole conversation. But yeah, people are talking about Linux servers. People are talking about home labs. People are talking about emulation. People are talking. It's funny because the emulation channel has gone from hey, I built a Mr. channel to the hey, I bought some weird thing from Alibaba that I can run every game I've ever wanted to play on it over the last couple of months.
Emulation handhelds are getting huge, not physically huge, but like that's the talk in the retro scene, at least on our server lately, is because they're very fast. Like you can emulate kind of damn near everything on these things. Xbox
360s, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Anyway, the Discord's a wonderful place to hang out and meet people that are into the same things as you. There's a whole group of people who are just hanging out and watching TV in the Discord in the evenings together, which I love. I think that's fabulous.
I started to read the most recent headline that somebody posted in the Linux channel, but I don't know if I should. It might be a vote against for some people, but it's very Haiku OS support upstreamed into GCC compiler.
I was just thinking, you know what? I just this morning, I woke up and I looked over at my wife as we were laying in bed together. I was like, hey, what's the status of Haiku OS support inside the GCC compiler? And now I know. I can tell her. She's going to be so excited to find out.
I find it quite interesting.
But yeah, you can go to patreon.com/techpod, find out how to sign up there. And as always, we want to thank all of our patrons, but especially our executive producer tier patrons, including Andrew Slosky, Bunny Fiend, also claims to be a room temperature superconductor, Paddle Creek Games makers of Fractured Veil, David Allen, James Kamek, Joel Krauska, Jordan Lippett, Just Wedge 3.0, Nick Johnston, Twinkle Twinkie, and Pantheon, makers of the HS3 high-speed 3D printer. I kind of think, I'm going to say this out loud, somebody in the Discord said something the other day that made me think. They said, I use the resources in this, or the people, the stuff that we talk about in the podcast to shape almost all of my purchasing decisions these days. And that is like, it's the kind of thing that advertising people love to tap into, which I'm less interested in helping. But like, I would like to do more product stuff because I think that we have a pretty unique perspective on product stuff. And I'd be interested to hear what people think about that. We need to do another survey is the other thing I realized. Yeah. So I'll work on putting that together and have something that folks can do to kind of tell us how we're doing. I want to know how Patreons feel like we're doing. And I want to know how normal listeners who aren't patrons think we're doing. And we'd love to get that feedback from folks. So anyway, I guess that's it for us this week. Thanks again to Wes for coming by. Brad, I'm glad to see your duck in the background again.
Yes, Wes got on this video call and immediately was just like, well, that's the most parental background I have ever seen on a video call before.
Look, man, you don't have a China hutch in your house?
No, I'm afraid not.
It's the defining characteristic for parents of a certain age.
I've been thinking, oh man, maybe this is, you know what? This is an episode idea right here. I was talking to my dad last night because I could rotate the laptop about 45 degrees. First, you get this very old stove.
Ooh, that's a cool stove.
Then you get this Harvest Gold refrigerator.
I had one just like that when I was a kid, but mine was green. It was the pea green color.
So this refrigerator is something like 35 to 40 years old and is still going.
They're probably spending more money on electricity for that thing than it's worth.
Maybe we should do an episode about old appliances that refuse to die.
I mean, look, there is something to be said about not building in the point of failure that will make the thing last 10 years. Yeah, it's a fantastic idea. My favorite thing is on top of the China hutch, there's a couple of ducks, and they always look happy, and I enjoy seeing them when you're visiting your folks. So,
it's probably nice to be a duck. I would be happy too.
See you all next week. Thanks for listening, everybody.